And go ahead and talk to us about, really the overarching theme of what Edison equation is about, and kind of your take on the philosophy of failure and how that factors into your entrepreneurship in general, and then how you factor that into your own, walk of entrepreneurship, and even in your own life.
Yeah, failing sucks. I mean, right there's no way to slice it any better. I mean, it's always a hard thing. I mean, it stings. I mean, you'll never enjoy it. It's just a bad feeling. I think if you talk to a lot of entrepreneurs when they're sort of in the throes of failure, they'll be pretty honest about how crappy it is. It's a lot easier to look back on it and say you learned a whole bunch and whatnot. But with that said, there's a lot of different ways to sort of categorize failure. I mean, one of the ways I think about failure is that there's two types, right? There's the good type and the bad type. The good type kind of failure is the stuff that you talk about mostly in these interviews with entrepreneurs. That's the failure where you've really worked hard, you've built something, and regardless of whether or not your company started going sideways or your product didn't find the right market fit, you've learned a lot, right? I mean, if you've done anything else, you still wouldn't have learned as much, you wouldn't have achieved as much, and you actually learned, why it was that you failed. So you can look back and take a lot of lessons away from it, right? It still sucks, but at least you've learned a lot, right? And no matter what, I mean, the alternative was that you could have been stuck in an office somewhere and probably pretty stagnant, right? So that's the good type of failure. The bad kind is the failure that is when you don't really know you're failing, right? I mean, so an example of that is, you have this great idea for something and you just keep thinking about it and you're sort of nonstop trying to cultivate this really perfect product in your mind, but never take action, right? So you just sit there and constantly think about it. And it was funny, there's a video by Z Frank called Brain Crack. It was probably from, I don't know, years ago, 5 years ago. And basically the gist of it is that ideas are like brain crack, right? I mean, you can, when they're in your head, they're perfect, right? And you're sort of addicted to them because you just keep thinking about them and, you just want to baby them, coddle them. But, it's not really until you let them out and unleash them, well, they start to crack and you find the problems with them and, you really get it out there. And that's a really bad type of failure because you've never even, set out to do something, right? So you failed before you ever accomplished anything or even tried to do it. So that's I think is the worst kind of failure where you never even, tried to be an entrepreneur, tried to do something, right? It failed by default. The other type of failure, which is a bad kind, again, which not knowing you're failing. But the other type is similar, but when you take too long to launch a product, where you wait too long, it's sort of missing the opportunity, and that's bad failure. You don't really learn anything from that. So I think the good
not to wait so long.
Right. So I mean, the good failure is when you've done something, you've pushed ahead, and you've learned from that, and you can see what the mistakes were. And the bad type of failure is when you didn't even know you failed. Right. You could be 90 years old, and then maybe you'll realize, like, crap. I mean, I failed at not living up to whatever I wanted to do, or not launching this company, or building this product, or whatever I wanted to do because you just didn't do it, and you never learned anything in sort of along the way.
Oh, that's an excellent distinction, regardless of the examples behind it or how, because I think that people would come up with their own kind of nuanced examples for that. But the fact that you say that there's two kinds of example or two kinds of failure, and a good and a bad one, but the only kind of bad failure is one that you don't realize that you failed on. Meaning also that, I guess the way that I want to interpret that is that when you don't know that there's a failure, that also means that you don't know what you can learn from it. So the only bad failure is one that you're not learning from.
Yeah, I mean, the worst failure is when you never attempted it, right? Yeah. I mean, so you just failed by default because there was no chance ever of success, right? So you had 0% of success. That's the worst failure. And then most of the other startups, the good failures are the ones where you had like a 1% chance, 2% chance. At least there was something there, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, and even while you were like, trying your damnedest to get to that 1% or 2% of success, I mean, at the very least, you moved yourself further along. You know where your weaknesses are. You know where your strengths are, and you're way better than the person you were before that, before you started.